Hi, everyone.
Hi, everybody.
Welcome back to our podcast.
Welcome back.
We're getting over a round of sickness in our house.
Like always, I feel
I
like
know,
most people might relate to this. Yes.
Yeah, and one thing me and Anne have been talking about lots over the last couple of weeks is how everyone in our house are sensitive people.
Including, we're all sensitive, and I feel like our animals are also sensitive.
All of our we're sensitive. Our kids are sensitive. It's not a bad thing. We're not saying this is a negative. It was just a real observation we've made in the last couple of weeks. Yeah. All our animals are sensitive except Hermione.
Hermione is our littlest cat. Yeah, she is stone cold sometimes.
Oh yeah, she's icy. She's icy. She loves me. Like I fall asleep on the couch sometimes at night. She just sleeps on me all night.
It's true. Me and her, we don't connect as well.
And Hermione, they're not friends. She's not sensitive enough for you. Maybe that's what it is.
It's true. Yeah. But we have been having a lot of kid emotional outbursts a lot of the time. Mm-hmm. And it's been hard to navigate in terms of how do you respond? What do you do? How do you not get frustrated? All of those things.
Totally. And, we're therapists, so we know some of this stuff, but, we empathize with parents because this is a hard thing to navigate.
Yeah. And one thing I want to say, even though we're therapists, I feel like we don't really know what to do either. Yeah. It's not we know, but applying it is very different.
A big thing that we utilize is just giving our children space to feel emotions.
Yeah.
Which is very vital, which is easier said than done because when you're a highly sensitive adult and I'm much more regulated in the recent years, but we can be dysregulated. Yes. And when we're dysregulated, we cannot expect our kids to be regulated.
No. And I think that's so interesting. I think that's common knowledge. Or not really common knowledge, but starting to get more popular, that people are starting to understand that if I want to impact my child in a positive way, then I need to regulate myself. And so that's really more in the common, I guess, discourse now.
Yes.
But it's hard to do, like you're saying. And it's after the fact, I think we always see that.
Yeah.
But
in the moment, it's hard.
Well, think about and this kind of leads into our topic about danger signals or dangerous. When my kids are crying and freaking out, it feels dangerous to me.
Your brain is lit up.
Yes, my brain is lit up. And then I react or I get defensive talk about danger signals. My brain's oh my God, this is not okay.
Yeah. And I think this is one of the biggest responsibilities we have as parents that is often not talked about or not accepted.
Yeah.
Because, we have no business expecting our kids to be regulated if we're not.
Yeah.
And that was a hard pill for me to swallow. I think that's a big thing that motivated me to actually become more regulated. Yes. I wish I was enough. I wish and I have been more in recent years.
You are enough.
I know, but it's one of those things where, when you see how you start affecting your kids, you're I got to work on myself.
Yes.
And we do this and we teach our kids the regulation skills. To be honest, I teach clients.
It's so funny. We have to say, our son is learning about breathing in school, which is actually kind of amazing because I feel
I didn't learn that in school.
What? That was never part of the discussion. So it's pretty cool that I think it's starting to be. But he knows this thing of bunny breathing.
Or bear breathing.
Which is, and that's kind of the way he describes it. We don't call it bunny and bear breathing, but it's different type of breathing that we do as clients. And so, but then in the moment, being let's apply bear breathing is very difficult, especially if our nervous system is reacting as this is dangerous.
Yeah.
And we're being dysregulated.
Yeah. It's one of those ones we teach clients a lot, and in our upcoming course we teach it triple inhale sigh.
Yes, that's the bunny breathing.
But is that the bunny breathing? It's literally the same thing.
The bunny breathing he told me
in
about.
Our course we should have called it bunny breathing. Now everyone do the bunny breathing. It would have been great.
Yeah. Yeah. But and I think when there's big emotion, whether in ourselves or other people, either we've learned that this isn't safe and this is dangerous in some way, or society has been hey, no, these big emotions aren't okay. We need to table them over there. So there's been messaging that we might view it as dangerous, and then we might become dysregulated ourselves too.
Yeah, and we're going to return to talking about this in a second as we go through. But our topic today is, what are the danger signals impacting your nervous system and chronic symptoms?
Yes.
And we need to know this to heal chronic pain and symptoms.
Right. So that was our example of one that impacts us maybe sometimes as dangerous.
Danger signal, like your kid's crying is a common one. Danger signals, they really cause our nervous system to become very dysregulated.
Yeah.
And can trigger and perpetuate chronic pain and symptoms. Mm-hmm. And I want to be clear, like a starting place to regulating your nervous system is identifying what danger signals are causing the dysregulation in the first place.
Yes.
What I see happen a lot with people is they learn about breath work or somatic practices, somatic movement, whatever it might be. Like
bunny breathing.
Yeah, emotional work. Bunny breathing. I love that you threw that in again. And they just start to utilize that.
Yeah.
But they don't spend the time mapping out, what are the danger signals? Okay,
so kind of this is like the why.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It's what brings you to the dysregulated state. Yeah. This is how Deb Dana talks about it. Like what's bringing you there? Mm-hmm. It's good that we understand like how we experience, for instance, the sympathetic system, which is often like an anxious or angry feel.
Yes.
Quick breathing, rapid heart rate.
Right.
And we understand the dorsal vagal system, which is where we feel exhausted. We shut down, we collapse, we go numb, we dissociate, despair. So understanding that, like mapping that out for people is important. Mm-hmm. But we need to know what's bringing you there.
Yes. Yes. Well, and sometimes I talk with people in this way of like, okay, your symptoms started here, but what is perpetuating them? What is keeping them going?
Mm-hmm. So danger signals is a term we utilize in our upcoming course, and I utilize it often with clients. So I'll give everyone the definition here.
Okay.
Danger signals are internal or external signals that activate the sympathetic or dorsal vagal systems. Often these are referred to as triggers. Mm-hmm. This is like the common thing that people will hear a lot. And they occur when a challenge or situation we face is just too big. Mm. It's too big for our nervous system to feel safe and be flexible. Now, I'm going to get a little sciencey here.
Oh, my gosh.
I love the science. I'm going to throw out a real jargony term, but it's an important term, so please don't turn the podcast off, people. This is a vital term to understand.
Bear with us, please.
And this comes from polyvagal theory. It's really useful. This is something that I think about a lot. When I was healing and even still now. And the fancy term is neuroception. Mm. So here's how I explain this to people. We all know what perception is, right? We perceive things. We perceive things, what's going on in our body, what's going on in our external world, what's going on in relationships. And this is very conscious. Yeah. We're very conscious of this. So when you meet a new person, we don't think about it like this, but we're making perceptions. Is this new person safe? Are they dangerous? What are the signs that are telling me this? The thing about perception is neuroception happens first. Mm-hmm. So when we talk about neuroception, what your nervous system is doing in every moment of your entire life, even before you had conscious memory, it's unconsciously to you, it's scanning. It's scanning internally, externally, in your relationships, and it's scanning for signals of safety or signals of danger.
Can I talk about horses for a minute here?
Let's hear the horse talk.
Well, I was just going to say this really applies to animals, and this really applies, like, from what I'm learning, to horses in terms of, like, they, with their neuroception, are always scanning. And so, because they're prey animals, right? And so they always are aware and looking for safety, and it's neuroception going on, for sure.
Yes. And the thing about neuroception is a lot of people are just unaware. Mm-hmm. And so you're getting these signals of safety or danger, and you're feeling a certain way in your system, but you're not really sure why.
Yeah.
And so part of the reason we're doing this podcast episode is to bring conscious awareness to the neuroception that's happening. Mm-hmm. And, here's the thing about neuroception. That kind of sucks. People don't love this part. But when we talk about, neuroception, the danger signals, the triggers, they don't always make logical sense or indicate real danger. And so what happens is neuroception can be accurate, or it can be inaccurate. There's some people walking around in the world. I am not one of them. I don't claim to be. My neuroception's become more accurate over time, but there's some people walking around in the world where their neuroception's super accurate. It's picking up the right amount, the right signals of danger or the right signals of safety. And so they get the right amount of energy in their nervous system.
Yes.
And their system's, as a result, flexible. They're not getting locked in a sympathetic fight or flight or a dorsal kind of shutdown place. It's accurate.
Yes.
But when we've faced overwhelming situations, trauma, chronic pain and symptoms, the neuroception becomes inaccurate.
And so over time, that kind of changes the neuroception.
Exactly. So what happens is all of a sudden your nervous system's picking up on signals of danger in your current environment when you actually might be safe.
So would that be that idea? And I think this is something that I commonly talk about with people, that idea of like getting stuck.
Yes.
And the nervous system getting stuck.
Yeah. Because the nervous system, it developed based on your biology, based on every moment in your entire life.
Right.
And so it's doing its best to protect you. So if you've faced overwhelming situations or trauma or difficult things in the past, and you have reminders of that in the present, you get these conditioned responses, these associations taking place, all of a sudden now your nervous system's reactive.
Yes.
It's very reactive, and that makes sense. And it makes sense based on, what you went through. But now, currently, maybe you're safe, and it's no longer adaptive, unfortunately.
Well, so back to that idea of understanding the why of things, understanding if this might be going on for you in terms of your neuroception, and then again looking at the triggers or danger signals and having an understanding of why.
Yeah. Now, as a funny little side note, how we share this with clients, because I think it's hilarious. Neuroception can be inaccurate the other direction. So
almost like I'm safe when
exactly.
Really not.
There's people walking around the world where they're picking up on more signals of safety than actually exist. Now, if you're listening to this podcast, you're like, wow, that sounds nice.
I know. I was just thinking,
that sounds blissful.
I don't know if that's
so I'll give you a little story on this. When I was younger, in my young 20s, in bands, and we kind of like rock bands, we'd play shows and stuff. Yeah. We had this one drummer, and he was a great time to hang out with. Even now, every once in a while, I think about it. I'm like, man, I miss that guy. Like, I haven't talked to him in many years because he was fun loving. Yeah. He was always in a good mood. And I learned over time, thinking back now, that his neuroception was off. Like, he was always feeling safe. And there were situations, so I remember one time he was driving to band practice and he never showed up. And I was like, what happened, man? And he was like, my car ran out of gas on the road. So he's just like, he lived in kind of this la-la world and he didn't take action when he needed to. So it actually did get him into difficult situations. Yeah. So it can be off in either direction, but for most people with chronic pain and symptoms, that's not relevant, but it's kind of an interesting idea. And so, we need to understand and map out the danger signals. And this allows us to understand the different triggers impacting your nervous system state daily. Yeah. And what may be triggering your chronic pain and symptoms.
And everybody's unique. And so this kind of list that we're going to go through is a general list.
It's a general list. Yeah. But we'll give everyone a task at the end, but think about this because everyone has unique danger signals.
Yes.
They do. They're unique to your nervous system. And so the first thing I talk about with people is trauma. Because a lot of danger signals that people are having in the present link back to a trauma response they had in the past.
Right. So that idea that neuroception can become changed or off or impacted, that can start from long, long before chronic pain and symptoms arise.
Yes. And this is why trauma can cause chronic dysregulation of the nervous system, like fight, flight, freeze, shut down. Yeah. And a great quote by Deb Dana, she talks about how trauma replaces patterns of connection with patterns of protection.
And that makes sense that it would do that in those patterns of protection, but that's not always helpful for us in the long run.
So instead of your nervous system picking up on signals of safety all the time, now it's picking up on signals of danger all the time because it's in the state of protection. Yeah, yes. Like it wants to protect you.
Yes.
And these danger signals become associated with trauma and can keep us dysregulated in the present moments, even if the danger is long past. And so I don't want to spend too much time on this of, what trauma is.
Right.
But I do want to reference a few ideas of like, what trauma can pertain to. And I'm careful here because it's different person to person. Like one event doesn't traumatize every single person on the earth. Like it's unique to your nervous system. But there are common things, like you think about childhood adversity, like a death in a family, residing in institutional care, financial concerns, being afraid of a family member, conflict in family, parental divorce, serious chronic illness in a family, or having a family member addicted to drugs or alcohol, or have some type of mental health concern.
Right.
Like when we face this as children, a lot of children don't put it together at that time, but then all of a sudden they start to get danger signals as adults that link back to all the adversity they went through as a child.
Yeah.
And so, at the extreme end, this could be sexual, physical, emotional abuse, whether it's in childhood or in adulthood.
Yeah.
But we also talk about bullying, like even from my own story, that really affected me. It still affects me. Yeah. I'm aware of that. And I'm very aware of the danger signals that my nervous system looks out for because of the bullying I went through. It could be injuries or accidents, unsafe relationships, life-threatening events, medical trauma, and a term that we talked about a few times, sensitization trauma, where, chronic pain and symptoms almost trigger a trauma response. Right. Because it's confusing, it's overwhelming, we don't see a solution, we feel hopeless, helpless. It makes sense that we have this trauma response to it. And so like we said, trauma, it causes your neuroception to become inaccurate in the present day. So people, places, situations, sounds, smells, sensations in your body become these danger signals because they linked back to a trauma response you had in the past.
Right.
And sometimes we're very aware of this, and sometimes not so much.
Yes.
So that's part of why we're going through this, is we need to bring awareness to like, what are the danger signals? And we're not going to necessarily understand how that developed, especially if it was like when we were a young child.
Right. I know. And sometimes we don't always need to know, that have those answers either.
Yeah. So, a few of mine that I've worked on over the years is bullying. Yeah. So what happened with bullying when I was younger is I developed this real fear of rejection.
Right.
And so my nervous system is high tuned to this, and I've had to work on it. It's gotten better over the years, but it looks for signals of rejection. What are the danger signals? So even if a friend doesn't call me for a couple of weeks, all of a sudden I'll just feel on edge. I'll feel in this like high sympathetic, anxious zone.
Right.
And that's what's taken place is I have this kind of danger signal to any fear of rejection. And so I'm scanning for it.
Yeah.
The other common one that I had to work through, and lots of people with chronic pain and symptoms have, is like medical trauma.
Yeah, that's huge. And I know we're not going to spend too much time here. We do have another podcast that we really do talk about this.
Yeah.
But what
happens is, we've had scary procedures in the past, bad interactions with the medical system.
Oh, yes.
Now, when people are going to a doctor's appointment or interacting with the medical system in any way, even if they're positive interactions, they're having like this survival response, like fight, flight, freeze, shutdown, right? Like they're having this response to it.
Yep.
And that's going to really affect yourself in the present. And that's something we need to work through, right?
And a lot of it is like what you're saying, is having that awareness that, okay, this is happening.
Yeah. But it can also be sensations. So the sensation of mine that still gets me sometimes is like a sweaty sensation. Because, and this makes sense for a lot of people, when in the far past, when I would have like almost panic, anxiety, I would feel very sweaty.
Yes.
And what it got linked. So the sweating got linked as like, oh, you're in danger. The issue though becomes that you get sweaty sometimes. That's part of being a human being.
Yeah.
And so I've had to work on it over the years, but years back, like even if I was like under a blanket and I was getting too hot, all of a sudden I'd feel myself becoming dysregulated. Like I couldn't tolerate it.
Yes. And that's it. So it's about understanding, okay, this is what's happening. And then almost like we talked about like corrective exposure or that corrective experience or that kind of like retraining the brain around that. And that piece is really important. But that's why we need to understand, okay, what are these dangerous signals and what's happening to us? Yeah. So we can respond to them correctly.
Yeah. When we work with people, you can uncouple them.
Yes.
So you can separate the dysregulated response from the danger signal.
Yes.
But the starting place is understanding, like, what are the sensations in your body that signal danger to you? In the external world, like social rejection for me. What are the signals of danger?
Yes.
Those are really important things for me to know, because even if they still trigger me sometimes, which they do, I want to be clear to people, like I'm able to identify, oh, this is what's happening, and I can break that response. And I've gotten better at it over the years, but this is an example of what I want people to work through.
Yeah, for sure.
Now, a few other things on the list here.
Yeah.
Perfectionism.
Yes.
Chronic stress.
Yes.
Burnout.
Yeah.
Now, what happens to people is, perfectionism is a coping mechanism. So people are coping often with the fear of failure. So the fear of failure is almost like this danger signal that a lot of people
And I think that makes sense. Like, no one enjoys failure. No one feels good at that.
Of course, but it's extreme.
Yes.
There's a real fear of it, and so perfectionism is a result. But then perfectionism can become the danger signal.
Yes.
And I know this from experience with like pressure, intensity, self-criticism. So I'm like trying to cope with a danger signal of fear of failure, but my coping is then becoming also a danger signal.
Yes.
It's a vicious cycle, people. But it's important to understand this, right? Like, throughout your day, like what are the signs that are signaling danger to you?
Yeah.
Like, when does the pressure become too high? Because I know that for myself. Life's pressureful sometimes. You feel pressure.
Yeah.
But I know where the line is, where it's like, if I push past this point,
yes,
I feel incredibly dysregulated.
Yeah. And you've had to you notice that, Tanner, by observing it, by being curious about it, by asking questions about it, and identifying that. And then you've learned kind of how to work with that. So that's been really useful for you.
Yes. But it's even working late at night, clear danger signal for me. Like anything past 5 p.m., it really is like, it signals to me. I don't know how that developed. Where in the morning, I'm fine.
Well, and one thing I want to say about this is you've really learned, okay, I can't work late at night. I get dysregulated, but it doesn't mean you're afraid of it. So I want to be clear that we're not identifying danger signals and then kind of complying to them or avoiding it.
Exactly.
It's kind of like this misinterpretation in the brain or nervous system. But it's a balance between, I'm not going to like push it either. It's like finding that safe balance.
Yeah. It's finding the balance, and it's finding out how much exposure you need. Because I run a business. Sometimes I have to work past 5 p.m.
And then you need to teach yourself that's
the
safe
reality.
Still.
And I have over time. So it's a much less dysregulating feeling now. And sometimes I actually feel okay doing it.
Yes.
Where years back, it would have really set me off.
Okay. So it's feeling it out that way in terms of like, because we don't, that other neuroception guy that like everything is safe. We're not saying, okay, go all the way to that end. Yeah. It's kind of creating this where, this middle ground of kind of where it's supposed to be of like.
Yeah. And that's the thing, is you want to honor your nervous system too.
Yeah.
Like, I'm never going to be someone that can work from like 2 to 9 p.m. every night.
Right.
I think that would be a really difficult thing for me. But I want my nervous system to be somewhat flexible. And so identifying that was a danger signal for me was useful, because I remember I'd work at this one job in public health many, many years ago. Yeah. And once a week, you'd have to work till like 8 p.m. And it was like 40 minutes drive from our house. By the time I got home, it was 9 o'clock at night. Yeah. And that I'd be so confused. Like, why am I having this fight or flight, anxious, angry response every Tuesday night when this is happening? And so bringing awareness of like, oh, this is a danger signal for me was really useful.
Yeah. Yeah. Yep, for sure. I think like back to the story that we started off about our kids, like it started with this podcast. I'm not expecting, like, I think it can be like a danger signal for me, and I can get really dysregulated, and I'm not expecting to never get dysregulated if they're kind of like screaming and crying, but understanding what's happening to me can help me better learn how to regulate myself within that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. We need the awareness that neuroception's happening.
Yeah.
And so the next one is socialization and isolation.
Yeah.
And this is important because a lot of people with chronic pain and symptoms, we start to view socialization as this dangerous thing. And this makes sense because when you're in a state of survival,
yes,
like your nervous system doesn't care at all about socialization.
Right. There's no room for that.
I don't care about this. Like we're in protection mode here.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so for a lot of people, a danger signal, and especially if you've faced adversity in relationships in the past, is scary. Like I know for myself, I have really had to work on that because being around people interacting was very overwhelming for me. Where compared to like hanging out with the animal was a very regulating, calming thing. It felt safer.
Yeah.
And so socialization can be a common danger signal. But then what happens to people again is then they isolate.
Right.
And the isolation then can become a dangerous signal.
Right.
So it's like that's how they cope.
Yes.
And I get it. I don't judge people because I've been there.
Yeah.
But the problem is like your nervous system to regulate, it needs co-regulation.
Yes.
It needs interaction with other nervous system in a positive way. Like it needs that. And so the isolation actually starts to send signals of danger to people's nervous system. But sometimes for people that feels safer than the socialization.
Yes. And I think this can be a difficult one, especially when people start to realize this. But then it's like, well, how do I start moving towards socialization? Because it can be so triggering or overwhelming.
Exactly. And it's a balance. I'll never be extremely extroverted. I'm not going to be extremely extroverted. Right. Like that's not in the cards for me. Like I like my alone time, but I know if I spend all week not interacting with friends or family, like I feel it.
Yes.
And so it is a balance. Like you want to honor your nervous system, like we said, but we also want to provide it signals of safety.
Yes.
And
we know with corrective exposure, our nervous system starts getting those safety signals.
Yeah.
And it becomes a little bit safer and easier as you move towards.
Exactly. Okay, next danger signal. Difficult emotions.
So what we're talking about with our kids then.
Yeah.
And our own difficult emotions that kind of rise.
Yes. This is one of the main causes of chronic pain and symptoms is the suppression of emotion.
Why do you think that is, Tanner?
Well, when we suppress our emotions, what happens is we're suppressing important things that we're meant to feel. We're meant to feel them. Yeah. And we suppress them.
Yes.
And then in all sorts of ways, we resist them. And we have a podcast episode on that, like 4 ways we resist emotions people can check out.
Yeah.
You resist them, then your nervous system is going to become incredibly dysregulated.
Yes.
Because it's not all about being calm. Like we need to be angry sometimes. We need to be sad sometimes. So it's going to become further dysregulated. And then the brain's going to trigger chronic pain and symptoms because the state of danger is increased.
Yeah.
And so it's this cascading effect that happens.
Totally. Like it's that idea that our emotions have to go somewhere.
Yeah.
And I think it's important to think of it that way as like, oh, I'm being triggered here, or I have emotions here, but if I'm just like stuffing it all down, where is it going?
Yeah.
What's it doing to me?
And for a lot of people, the danger signal can be a certain emotional state. And it's different. Again, it's unique. Like I've worked with people where anger is the main one that they view as dangerous. Sadness, guilt, shame. Shame's a really common one, of course. Yeah. But it can be positive things. It can be love. It can be joy.
Yes.
And these are sensations. Like basically when that emotional state comes on in your body, people through neuroception pick up of like, oh, this is dangerous. Don't feel this.
Yes.
And so you can see the issue that starts to take place. And this is why one of the main components we talk about is processing emotions. We have like many practices on it in our upcoming course.
Yeah.
And as well, when we're working with clients, this is one of the main pillars that we focus on.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Next, lack of movement.
Lack of movement. Yes.
Yeah. Or the movement itself. It could be either or.
And I think a lot of people listening to this can probably relate to this one.
Because when you have chronic pain and symptoms, movement's one of the first things to go.
Yes, which makes sense. Again, I want to validate that makes sense that it does go. No one wants to feel pain.
I did the same thing. I stopped moving my body almost completely by the end. But the lack of movement, unfortunately, actually starts to signal to the brain, oh, this is unsafe. Like, I'm not safe to move.
Yes.
My body's damaged in some way. It must be because, Tanner's not moving, so there must be something wrong.
Yes. So it just reaffirms that and continues that belief.
Yeah. And lack of movement naturally causes us dysregulation.
So, right. And I think that is a key thing that I'm starting to talk more about with clients for sure, is how much regulation can come with movement and leaning into movement. Yeah.
It's really difficult to be regulated when we almost don't move our bodies at all.
Yes. Why is that, do you think?
Because our nervous system responds to this, especially like slow movement, flowing movement, certain postures, like they affect your system. They can help bring on a ventral vagal state of safety, connection, calmness, ease. But when we resist, when we freeze and we don't move at all, like we're not able to express emotions very well.
Yes.
We're not able to, experience emotional states. We're not able to work through survival energy. Like movement's very key for regulation, and movement's very key to unlearn chronic pain and symptoms.
Well, something that comes to mind for me is dancing. And it doesn't mean everyone has to do dancing or love dancing. I don't really like dancing, to be honest. But what I know about dancing though, and what lots of people like about it, is it brings on that feeling of connection, safety, that ventral energy that you're talking about. Like that's what people get out of dancing, out of movement. And there's something about that in terms of like there's something happening to the nervous system when people are dancing.
There is, like, expressive movement is very key.
Yeah.
And we talk about this lots with clients. And in our course, we have so many movement practices.
Yes.
That are essential.
And it doesn't have to be dancing.
It doesn't have to be dancing. We have one video where we dance though.
Yeah.
Anne wasn't happy
embarrassed
about
that video.
I mean,
if you do,
I made Anne dance.
Yes. But there is something, but there, like, I think universally people feel good when they, enjoy dancing when they are dancing.
Yeah. And so the danger signal can be both. Like the movement becomes a danger signal for people, but then unfortunately the lack of movement becomes a danger signal.
Yeah.
So it can go both ways. Yeah. And we've discussed this quite a bit with different things because it's the way we cope. We just stop moving. But this is something people need to overcome. And 2 episodes ago, we gave a whole outline of how to start to break conditioned responses with movements, positions. So if you're listening to this and you haven't heard that episode, go back and listen to it. It's one of our longer episodes because we made it maybe a little too detailed. We gave away all the secrets. So just go listen to it. There's a lot of info in there.
Yeah.
Now, this next one's a little close to home for me, and it's going to sound a little odd to people.
Yeah.
Done a lot of research in this area. Premature birth.
Yes.
Now, let me explain this first, okay?
Okay.
This is close to home because I was premature. You were premature. Both our kids were really premature. Like our kids were born at around 30 weeks.
Yeah.
So yeah, like 3/4 of the way through a pregnancy. And spent a lot of time in the NICU. And we know with premature birth that dysregulation is much more common when you become an adult.
Yes. And why is that, Tanner?
It's kind of complex and we're not exactly sure. I know in polyvagal theory, Dr. Porges has talked about it quite a bit. And I think it's important because you think about what happens when you're premature.
Yeah.
So our kids were in the NICU for 2 months at least, a bit longer. And usually a baby's at home, constantly being touched by their parent. The problem with the NICU, and especially our second child during COVID, there was such, like, we would go and we would spend hours with our kids in the NICU, but eventually have to go home to sleep. So they're getting less interaction. They're in this very sterile environment. And of course, their bodies, their brain, their nervous system is not fully developed.
Yes.
Compared to like a baby that usually goes to full term. So there's a lot of effect here. And the reason I put this in is to explain to people that, trauma, overwhelming situations they can happen before conscious memory.
I think that could be overwhelming for people. Like people that might identify with premature birth are like, well, there's nothing I can do about that. Yes. Or no conscious memory say, I can't do, what can I do about that?
Yeah, and it's one of those ones where you're not going to process the trauma memory.
Right.
But we can start to identify danger signals, and you may not be 100% certain if that's where they came from. But it's important to understand. This goes for anything. Like people who've had abuse in families before they really had conscious memory, that's going to affect your nervous system. And I want to give investors hope here, you can still work towards regulation. You can do all of that. Like you're not going to like magically remember things before you had conscious memory. That's just not going to happen.
No.
But your body remembers.
Well, and just that awareness that maybe that is what's going on is important.
Yeah. Next, dangerous or oppressive social factors.
Yes. And we've talked about this at different points on the podcast before.
We talk about social safety.
Yeah.
And this is vital because we've talked lots about danger signals that are almost sensations or things in our environment, but it can be bigger environments. It can be your larger family, your community, society as a whole. Like if you're picking up signals of danger or oppressive factors, those are going to be danger signals for you.
Now, sometimes so we've talked about in this podcast today, Tanner, like neuroception being off. Like maybe it is safe, but we're kind of picking it up as dangerous. But often with society and like oppression and different things going on, it's not off.
It is accurate.
It is dangerous. Yeah. It's accurate. So
that's it.
What would we say about that?
And I think this is an important point to hit on. Whether neuroception is accurate or not, doesn't matter so much. Like it might matter based on the actions you take.
Right.
But you still need to work with that energy.
Okay.
Like it's still there. Like you're still having a fight, flight, freeze response. Like you need to do the work to work through that.
Okay.
Now, like if we determine, okay, like my neuroception is actually accurate here. Like I'm picking up on danger signals in my community, right? Say you're part of some type of community and someone's being a real jerk or asshole. Like that's gonna affect things, and you're gonna have to work through that. And you might have to change things as much as you can in your environment, and those are harder changes to make.
Yeah.
When we talk about like larger societal oppressive factors, one person, it's hard to have an effect on that. You can still be part of advocacy groups. You can be part of all sorts of things that can support you in actually working towards a sense of safety. But like these danger signals can be wider than our small knit group.
Well, and it is understanding that of like, okay, this is accurate. I am perceiving this as dangerous and it's accurate, but then how do I still take care of myself and my nervous system within that?
Exactly. Now, the last one I want to mention here is a common danger signal for people in chronic pain or symptoms is chronic pain or symptoms.
Oh, yeah. And I think that's number one, of course. It's like pain comes on, dangerous. And that's part of what kind of perpetuates chronic pain and symptoms is this view that it's dangerous.
Yes. And that makes sense. Pain, physical symptoms, as Alan Warren talked about, are literal danger signals from your brain.
Yes.
And when the body's not damaged, we misinterpret. We think there's something really wrong with the body.
Right.
But like we can have an overwhelming response to those sensations. That's why we do somatic tracking. That's why we do the brain retraining. That's why we regulate and work on attending to the sensations, changing the emotional response. So they're not so much sending a danger signal. Like now, the odd time that pain comes on, I still feel a little bit in danger. Might worry about it a bit. But it's not as nearly as severe as it was when I was in chronic pain or symptoms or after that, immediately after when I had relapses.
Yes. And you've done a really good job, Tanner, at teaching your brain, okay, this is actually safe. I don't need to react in this way or view it as dangerous. Through that corrective exposure therapy, through that brain retraining, through all these different pieces of kind of making that shift.
Yes. So it's vital for people to understand that of how they're responding to their pain or symptoms.
Yeah.
They likely are danger signals for you because that's what makes us human.
Yes.
But we do need to retrain the brain.
Well, and it is asking, okay, is my response to my pain and symptoms perpetuating it further?
Yes.
Yeah.
So this was our list. And I want to be clear. This is not a complete list.
No, and you might not relate with everything on this list either.
Yeah, like everyone's nervous system is unique.
Yeah.
But the first step towards regulation and healing chronic symptoms is figuring out what your unique danger signals are.
Yeah.
And so the task.
Okay.
It's a simple task.
Yeah.
And it's one of these things that you're going to do ongoing. I'm still learning more about myself. I'm still learning what danger signals are happening. Sometimes I'm not necessarily sure like what brings me to a dysregulated place. But, we want people to review the danger signals we covered in this episode and write out what danger signals could be leading to your nervous system dysregulation and chronic symptoms.
And why do you think this would be a helpful task for people to do?
It's important because otherwise we are hucking all sorts of things at ourselves, but we're not even sure what's bringing us to a sympathetic, fight or flight, anxious, angry place, or what's bringing us to a dorsal vagal, shut down, collapse, numb, despair place.
Yeah.
If you don't know what's bringing you there, that's going to keep happening. So the first thing is we got to bring that awareness to it.
Yes. Now, we want to bring that awareness to it, but we don't want to hyper-focus on it. So that's the other challenge, and we didn't really talk about that in this episode. Yeah. We want to become aware, but then we want to approach with curiosity and like, okay, this is okay. And so not this like obsessive, hyper-focused fix, which I think we can fall into easily.
Yes, we want to be careful there.
Yeah.
So thank you everyone for listening.
Thank you for listening.
We're going to go off and be our sensitive, close-knit family.
Yeah.
I'm excited.
We're going to go see our sensitive dogs now.
Our dog's sensitive.
She's very sensitive.
She's a sensitive being.
She's come to us.
She's joined the sensitivity club.
She knew.
We have a little club going
she knew
on.
What was happening? Yeah.
We got to involve Hermione though, even though she's not sensitive.
Yeah, she's the outlier in our family. I don't know. She's odd.
I think we just think she's odd because she's not sensitive.
It's true. I think people that have cats, cat people might relate to having this like kind of like stoic, aloof cat over there.
She's stoic and she puts up with nothing.
Oh yeah,
she's
the toughest of our family.
I know. I was carrying. I love how we're talking this at the end. I was carrying him down the stairs because we had our babysitter come on Friday night.
Yeah.
And she saw the babysitter as I was carrying her down the stairs.
Yeah. But this wasn't a tough response. She was scared.
But what happened is I was trying to hold her to bring her into the basement because we locked him down there. And she just tore up my chest. Like there are scratches all over here.
All right.
The other cat would have been anxious and just cowered, but she's
she wanted to fight. Like
she's like, I'm not messing around. Like you let me go, and I'm like on the stairs. I don't want to drop her, but I did drop her because like.
You just talked a lot just now about how like we lock up our cats in the basement, and you don't want to drop and abuse your cat. I'm just saying
I'm scared. I love Hermione, but yeah, it was painful. There's things you can learn from Hermione.
Yeah.
Okay, well, we should end this episode now. Okay. Thank you, everyone, for listening, and we'll talk to you next week.
Talk to you next week.